November 5th, 2025, Moscow, Russia. Behind the walls of the Kremlin, 57 of Russia's most senior officials gathered beneath the double-headed eagle. On the table before them lay a dossier stamped Sarmat Operational Test. Final authorization inside. Plans to prepare 3 RS-28 Sarmat intercontinental ballistic missiles, each carrying 10 nuclear warheads. Enough to erase Kyiv, Dnipro, and Kharkiv in under 8 minutes. The Kremlin was once considered untouchable, but today, the sky over Moscow has cracked. Ukraine launched Combined Operation. 15 Bayraktar TB2 drones and 10 upgraded MiG-29s stood ready to strike the most heavily protected airspace on Earth. Moscow's $9.4 billion layered defense shield, protected by Podsolnuk radar, Krasakha 4EW, Buk M3, Pantsir S-1, and the S-500 Prometey. Could unmanned drones and fighter jets pierce Russia's steel sky? Or will this be Ukraine's greatest miscalculation? Let's find out. November 5th, 2025, Moscow, Russia, 10 a.m. The sky above Moscow was gray and silent. Inside the Grand Council Hall of the Kremlin, 57 of Russia's most powerful figures gathered beneath the double-headed eagle. The chandeliers burned bright, but the air was colder than stone. At the center sat Vladimir Putin. Around him, Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu, General Gerasimov, and the heads of Roscosmos and the Strategic Missile Forces. On the table lay a single folder marked Sarmat Operational Test. Final authorization inside it. Plans for a limited nuclear strike on Ukraine using 3 RS-28 Sarmat ICBMs, each carrying 10 warheads with a combined yield of 100 megatons. Enough to erase Kyiv, Dnipro, and Kharkiv from the map in less than 8 minutes. Putin's words were measured, almost whispering, "We will end this war on our terms, and remind the West who commands the sky." The generals nodded. Outside, the red flag fluttered above the Kremlin spires, unaware it might soon signal the world's end. Unseen to them, every vibration, every coded phrase in that room was already being captured. Ukraine's AI listening network, Perun Sentinel, had tapped into an encrypted satellite channel orbiting 22,000 miles above Earth. The data spike registered at 10:17 a.m., flagged as Category Omega, potential nuclear pre-launch sequence. Inside the Kremlin, the meeting continued, confident, secretive, unbroken. But somewhere beneath Kyiv, a line of text appeared on an operator's screen. Authorization protocol detected, Moscow. Immediate response required. History had just started counting down. 10:30 a.m. Kyiv time, 30 meters underground, the operations room of the Ministry of Digital Defense sat in darkness. The central screen showed Moscow, a vast heart pounding beneath glass. The Kremlin's secret was no longer secret. Red letters flashed. Category Omega. Nuclear deployment protocol confirmed. Silence swallowed the room. Calm snapped into instant action. General Alexander Havrilenko placed both hands on the steel table, his voice like a knife. "They are about to do it. There is no line of retreat. We must strike straight to the heart." On screen 2, the Kremlin's defensive architecture peeled back layer by layer. Podsolnuk long-range radar, multi-layer air defense network, Krasakha 4, Buk M3, Pantsir S-1. And finally, the absolute firewall S-500, Prometey, a machine that seemed impossible to pierce, an air defense system proclaimed invulnerable to any threat. But the blade had been waiting in the dark for a long time. ENLEA 100 was watching everything over Russian airspace. Stealth Channel 4, northwest wind, the UAV officer reported. If we hug the Moskva at under 45 meters, their radars have only 8 seconds to react. 8 seconds. Enough for history to turn, or to end a nation. Approve combined operation. The order was given. At Poltava Air Base, 15 Bayraktar TB2s were lying in wait. Phase 1, the bait. Their mission, to provoke, not to destroy. Programmed to mimic flock signals on radar, they will force the air defense batteries to open fire and expose their tactics. Each TB2 cost $5 million. Each Russian interceptor, $15 million. Phase 2 would strike deeper. 10 upgraded MiG-29's Fulcrums would climb, carrying R-77s and Kh-31s, a strike package worth nearly $200 million. These were modified fighters, 19 months of covert upgrades, low observable skins, infrared suppression, and digital stealth suites, reducing detectability by up to 87%. The plan skirted suicide, a 600-kilometer penetration through 240 radar stations, 2 Panzer belts, 76,000 cameras, and a Krasuka 4 EW node. Moscow's defensive ring, with an estimated $9.4 billion budget, now faced a blueprint to rip its command center open. And the sky over Eastern Europe began to shudder. 10:42 a.m. The western sky over Moscow remained eerily calm, as if the city had no idea it was about to be struck in the heart. But from Poltava, 15 Bayraktar TB2s began their final flight. A formation worth $75 million in total, launched not to destroy, but to sacrifice with precision. They flew in a widening arc, no higher than 60 meters, skimming the cold air above the snowline. Not a drone strike team, but 15 deliberate torches sent into the storm. Russia detected them in 4.2 seconds. Red alerts flashed across Panzer S1, Buk M3, and Podsolnuk radar stations. The sky tore open as 32 interceptor missiles launched, each worth $1.2 to $3 million. In less than 42 seconds, the first 4 TB2s were gone. Russia had just burned $67 million in air defense firepower to erase $20 million of decoys. But war never follows clean arithmetic. The second wave hit, heavy, relentless, smashing through the sky like iron mallets. 14 TB2s fell, one after another, dissolving into bright flashes and dark trails of smoke. Russia believed the threat was neutralized. They believed every angle was sealed, but the 15th survived. TB2-15 slipped through a radar blind spot lasting only 0.8 seconds. A software glitch so small it might as well have been fate. It knifed toward the city's core, the Kremlin, closing distance fast, 700 meters, 400, 120. When it struck the copper-green dome, the explosion wasn't massive, just 12 kilograms of fragmentation charge, but it cracked history. The dome burst into flame and shrapnel, smoke spiraling upward like a black flag over Moscow. Sirens screamed, troops scrambled. State media went dark for 11 minutes, but civilians had already filmed everything. The footage spread faster than the fire itself, and that was only the opening of the gate. From the south, 10 upgraded MiG-29's Fulcrums, a formation worth $200 million, broke through the cloud layer, engines roaring like thunder rolling straight through the bones of the city. They did not come to warn. They came to strike while the Kremlin was blind. At the exact moment Russia's heart was exposed. In that instant, Moscow understood. Too late. The loss of 14 drones was not Ukraine's failure. It was the price of entry. Stay with me. What comes next is not just a battle. It is the moment Moscow realizes it is no longer untouchable. 11:02 a.m. The sky above Moscow trembled like a crack tearing through history. From 9,000 meters up, 10 MiG-29 Fulcrums dove in a spearhead formation, engines roaring like thunder tearing the clouds apart. They were no longer hiding. This was the moment of revelation, the moment to show the world that Ukraine had reached the center of Russian power. Lock primary target, Kremlin Command Complex. The order was cold, surgical. At 12 kilometers out, the fighters dipped their noses. Targeting systems locked onto heat signatures and radar reflections from the city's heart. 20 Kalta-29T air-to-surface missiles detached from their wings, each worth nearly $1.2 million, streaking forward like flaming steel arrows. Moscow lit up in a flash of electric fire. Russia responded instantly. The Panzer S1 batteries swung their autocannons, Buk M3 launchers fired volleys of interceptors, and the S-500 Prometei shield engaged to hunt down incoming warheads. In 10 seconds, the sky turned into a maze of explosions, contrails, and shattering shockwaves. 18 out of 20 missiles were intercepted, a near-perfect defense. But war does not require perfection. It only needs one opening. The last two missiles slipped through the storm and struck the Kremlin guest house, only 190 meters from the main palace. The twin detonations echoed across the city like ceremonial funeral drums. 5 senior officials were killed, 20 others wounded, including aides, analysts, and communications officers. The city froze. Windows shook. Cameras caught fragments of the red roof falling like black snow. Meanwhile, MiG-29 tail number K-27 took shrapnel from an interceptor burst. One stabilizer shredded, engine coughing flame. The pilot did not eject. He pulled the stick, coaxing the crippled aircraft back toward Ukrainian airspace on only 31% thrust. He survived. And Putin? Safe, deep inside a hardened underground bunker. The throne remained, but the silence around it was no longer the same. Ukraine's purpose was not assassination. It was the message carried inside the explosion. We can reach your heart at any moment. Sit at the negotiation table. Moscow woke to a morning unlike any it had ever known. The city still stood, its towers, avenues, and crowds, but the air had changed. It was heavier, thicker, so quiet that one could almost hear the sound of fear breathing. News spread within 7 minutes through independent channels, and within 23 minutes, the entire world knew. Ukraine had struck the center of Russian power, not a border outpost, not an oil depot, not a warehouse, but the Kremlin itself. At the diplomatic guest complex, rescue crews clawed through broken stone and shattered plaster. 5 deaths had been confirmed. 3 security advisors, a deputy parliamentary secretary, and a senior diplomat. 20 more were injured, many with crushed ribs, severe burns, or traumatic head damage from blast waves. The numbers may have been small by wartime measure, but in a place like this, they were a political earthquake. Inside the National Security Chamber, Putin sat in silence. No one spoke. No one even dared shift in their chair. His expression did not change, but his eyes did. When power is touched, fear no longer belongs to the public. It belongs to the one who holds it. In Kyiv, there were no cheers, no applause, no anthem. Only a single report read slowly. Primary strategic objective achieved. Demonstrate the ability to penetrate and strike the core defensive command of the Russian Federation. They understood what that meant. Russia could respond at any moment. But like a blade laid against an adversary's throat, the power is not in the cut. The power is in the knowledge the cut can be repeated. International media named the event Night of the Broken Sky. The ruble fell 19% in 6 hours. 41 private flights departed Moscow that day, carrying families of ministers and oligarchs abroad. Small public gatherings began to form, first in St. Petersburg, then Yekaterinburg, then Kazan. There were no chants, no banners, no slogans. People simply stood still, looking up at the sky, understanding for the first time that Russia was no longer untouchable. In Washington, Berlin, and Beijing, secure phones rang without pause. Behind every closed door, a single question echoed. If Ukraine can strike the Kremlin today, where can they strike tomorrow? And at the end of the night, deep beneath Kyiv, General Havrilenko spoke a single line, quiet but heavier than any missile. We do not need to win today. We only need them to understand that we can win. The war was not over, but the balance had shifted, and history, from this moment forward, would never return to what it once was. Wars do not end with the loudest explosions, but with the silence afterward. The moment when both sides realize there is no path forward that does not demand a greater price than the last. After the strike on the Kremlin, the world stood at that threshold. Russia could no longer claim invulnerability. Ukraine could no longer be dismissed as the weaker state forced only to defend. And the nations watching from afar were now compelled to reconsider their place in a balance of power that had suddenly shifted. Yet in that tension, it was the ordinary people who felt the consequences most clearly. Russian mothers looked to the sky, knowing their sons would be sent to the front once more. Ukrainian children tried to sleep to the sound of air sirens and the glow of missiles crossing the night. Every victory for a nation came paired with grief for its people, and so the final question was no longer who is stronger, but how much loss is enough. Ukraine proved it could strike at the heart of Russia, but its goal was not endless vengeance. It was to claim a rightful seat at the negotiation table, where it would not bow under force, but look its opponent in the eye. The war continues. The borders still burn beneath the winter sky, but the world has now heard a message spoken not with words, but with impact. No empire is eternal, and the will of a nation can reshape the course of history. Peace may not arrive tomorrow, but from that moment, it became something possible. If you found this analysis valuable and want to support more in-depth breakdowns like this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and tap the notification bell so you won't miss what happens next.